Well, we've completed Season 6 of The X-Files, which means it's now time to rank it. This time I'm gonna do things a tad different in that if a story is a two-parter, I'm gonna rank them as one. I find it difficult to rank an episode that is part of a larger story without the context of the larger story. So for example, Dreamland Part I and II will be ranked as one. But anyways, with that out of the way, let's begin. Coming in at number 22, dead last for Season 6, is Alpha. This is one of those episodes that I don't hate, but I also don't really get excited about watching. It just kind of exists, and for a season that's actually pretty strong overall, something had to land at the bottom, and for me it's this one. The core idea isn't terrible. A shape-shifting dog with a kind of primal, almost werewolf-adjacent mythology could have been really cool. There are moments where you can see the potential. It even gives off a faint wolfen vibe, but the episode never really leans into it enough to make it memorable. The Karen seducing Mulder angle is also kind of weird, mostly because the show has spent 6 seasons establishing Mulder and Scully's dynamic, so watching someone try to wedge themselves into that feels more awkward than dramatic. Meanwhile, Scully basically spends a good portion of the episode looking like she wants to rip this poor woman's head off, making her the true alpha of the episode. But when all said and done, this episode lands unfortunately at the very bottom. It's perfectly watchable, there are some decent dog moments, but nothing really sticks with you afterward, and in a season with stronger entries, that's enough to push it to the bottom spot.
You're not gonna tell me that a dog did this?
Bad dog.
Coming in at number 21 is The Rain King. Now this is one of those episodes where my placement probably sounds harsher than my actual feelings, because I do like this episode. I've watched it multiple times. It's charming, but it barely feels like an X-File. The weather control premise is interesting in theory, but the story itself plays out more like a romantic comedy than a paranormal investigation. Honestly, it almost feels like an episode of The Love Boat. People meet, emotions get messy, there's relationship drama, and by the end everyone's feelings are sorted out. That's basically the structure here, just with a little lightning and a cow being thrown into the air. What really carries the episode are the Mulder and Scully moments. Their back and forth is fun. There are some great jokes, especially the ones poking at Mulder's dating life, and Scully's speech near the end is genuinely nice. It even feels like she's talking about her own relationship with Mulder more so than Sheila and Holman. But when I'm ranking the season as a whole, this one just doesn't have much weight to it. There's no real danger, the stakes feel low, and the paranormal element never quite becomes the focus. So for me, The Rain King falls into what I'd call X-Files light. Lots of whimsy, very little menace, and in a stronger season, that's enough to push it near the bottom.
Mulder, when was the last time you went on a date?
I will talk to you later.
Coming in at number 20 is Trevor. This is the episode about an inmate named Pinker who gains the ability to phase through solid objects after being caught in a tornado or something. This allows him to escape custody and go looking for the son he never knew he had. Conceptually, there's some fun stuff here. The whole phasing through walls ability is a cool visual idea, and it gives the episode a unique hook compared to a lot of the other Monster of the Week stories. But there's one thing that's always bothered me: Mulder's closing line. The whole everyone deserves another chance sentiment just comes off as really strange, especially when you consider who we're talking about. Pinker isn't some misunderstood guy who made mistakes. He's a violent psychopath who murders people. Even before prison, it's mentioned that he attacked a guy for cutting him off in traffic. So the idea that he somehow deserved the opportunity to reconnect with his son has always felt off to me. It almost comes across like the episode is placing blame on his ex June for not telling him about his child, which makes even less sense when you remember she was trying to protect her son from a clearly dangerous man. She didn't give up her son because she was selfish, she gave up her son because she wanted him to be safe. So while Trevor is definitely watchable, that weird disconnect combined with stronger episodes in season 6 is enough to keep it near the bottom of the ranking for me.
Hey, look at this.
Ouch.
Coming in at number 19 is Milagro. Milagro has Mulder and Scully investigating a series of murders connected to a novelist named Philip Paget, a man who seems to have an almost supernatural ability to influence reality through his writing, while also becoming obsessively fixated on Scully. Honestly though, who can blame him? Now, this isn't one of my favorites, but it's also one I kind of make fun of whenever I watch it. Between the very pretentious monologues and the whole tortured writer who imagines himself irresistible to Scully angle, there's something about it that just comes off as very silly to me. I understand what the episode is trying to do. It's very Scully focused, and it's clearly aiming for something deeper, exploring longing, connection, and maybe hinting at emotional gaps in her life, but the execution sometimes feels off and almost reduces her to someone whose primary motivation is just to get laid. Or at least that's the version Paget is projecting onto her. He's basically writing his own fantasy version of Scully, one where she secretly desires him. If it were that easy, Paget, I would have done it 20 years ago. There's also a meta layer here, with Paget acting almost like a stand-in for the writers themselves. The idea that creating characters can blur the line between fiction and reality. That's an interesting concept and probably the most compelling part of the episode, but overall Milagro just doesn't fully land for me. It leans very hard into atmosphere and inner dialogue, but sacrifices a bit of clarity along the way, and in a season with stronger, more engaging stories, that's enough to keep it toward the lower end of the ranking.
You're a writer. Anything I'd know?
Coming in at number 18 is Tithonus. Tithonus is Scully partner with an aging photographer who appears to have cheated death decades earlier and now has the ability to see when someone is about to die, captured as a dark presence in his photographs. It's actually a pretty fun concept. The idea that you could defeat death simply by refusing to look at it is interesting, even if it does raise some obvious questions. I mean, if you're dying, do you really have the option to just not look? The body kind of does its own thing in that moment, no? But once you accept the premise, there's some cool stuff to explore. The episode also heavily connects back to Clyde Bruckman, and it almost feels like a continuation or maybe even a payoff to the whole "you don't die" prophecy. The big question is whether she was always immortal from that moment, or if this episode is where that change actually took place. If the idea is that Alfred passed his gift or curse onto Scully, that opens up even more questions. Why doesn't she see death the way he does? Does she now heal faster? Mulder even mentions her unusually rapid recovery at one point. Does this officially make her part of the X-Men? I mean, Disney does own both properties, so why not? Overall, I do enjoy the episode, but it creates a lot of mythology implications without fully committing to them. It's interesting, but it also leaves you with more questions than answers, which is why it lands in the middle lower part of the season for me. Landing at number 17 is SR-819. Anytime the show puts the spotlight on Skinner, I'm generally on board, and this episode is no exception. The story revolves around him being infected with nanotechnology that can kill him at any moment, forcing him into a dangerous political situation involving a Senate bill tied to a much larger conspiracy. What's always stood out to me though is the ending. It feels pretty clear that Skinner knows Krychek is behind everything, so the obvious question becomes, why doesn't he just tell Mulder and Scully? The only explanation that really makes sense is that he's protecting them. If Mulder knew for sure Krychek was responsible, he'd go on the warpath, probably get himself fired by Kirsch, and make things even worse. So Skinner keeps it to himself. The episode also brings back Senator Matheson and confirms he's involved in the larger conspiracy, which works fine, but feels like when Section Chief Blevins magically reappeared so they can make him part of it too. Plot-wise, this is one of those mythology stories where the political details get a little murky. There's a lot of jargon about legislation and global health funding, and I'll admit some of it goes over my head. Krychek's role in all of this mostly feels like leverage. He now has complete control over Skinner, someone inside the FBI he can manipulate whenever it benefits him, and boy does he use it to his advantage. Although seriously, what the hell is with that disguise? Overall, it's a solid episode, maybe not the most memorable mythology chapter, but Skinner-focused episodes are almost always enjoyable, and that alone helps it land somewhere in the middle of the ranking.
What's this about, Krychek? One good time.
At number 16, we have The Beginning. This episode picks up directly after the events of Fight the Future, with Mulder and Scully once again dealing with alien conspiracies, government cover-ups, and the fallout from everything that happened in the movie. On paper, this should feel huge. It's the first episode after the theatrical film, so you'd expect a big sense of momentum or a major shift in direction. And while I do enjoy it, the biggest issue for me is it feels a little too familiar. Mulder and Scully are separated from the X-Files again. The conspiracy is still one step ahead again. And the same players are still manipulating things behind the scenes again. It almost comes across like a remix of mythology beats we've already seen instead of a true escalation. After the movie, I was kind of hoping for something that pushed the story forward more dramatically, maybe a bold reset or a clear new direction, but instead we land in territory that feels comfortable rather than exciting. Even a middle-tier mythology episode of The X-Files is better than most television these days, but compared to the rest of Season 6, the beginning just doesn't stand out as much as I'd hope, which is why it lands right around the middle of the ranking.
You're a very special boy, Gibson. You know that yourself.
I'm a very special lab rat.
Landing at number 15 is Biogenesis. This episode kicks off the mythology arc that deals with an ancient alien artifact discovered off the coast of Africa, something that may prove humanity itself has extraterrestrial origins, while Mulder begins experiencing some really nasty migraines that may be connected to the object. Rewatching this one, it's actually better than I remembered. There's some interesting material here, especially the bigger thematic questions about where humanity came from and what that means. The idea that human life might have extraterrestrial roots isn't exactly new in science fiction, but it's still fun to explore, and Scully's internal conflict over the implications is probably the most compelling part of the episode. That said, I still don't love the Mulder mental breakdown storyline. We've kind of been down that road before, and it feels a little repetitive here. Maybe it works better once you factor in the full arc, but on its own, it's not my favorite direction. It also doesn't help that Diana Fowley is heavily involved again. At this point, she mostly just feels like a walking complication for Mulder and Scully, and I'm more frustrated by her presence than intrigued. On the positive side, it's always nice to see Krycek come back. He's one of those characters who instantly adds tension whenever he shows up. Overall, Biogenesis is a solid mythology setup with some strong ideas, but also some elements that don't fully land for me. It ends up sitting right in the middle of the season. Good, but not one of the standouts. Sitting at number 14 is Agua Mala. A hurricane traps Mulder and Scully inside a flooded apartment building where residents start getting attacked by some kind of aquatic creature lurking in the rising water, which turns out to be a jellyfish-like tentacle monster capable of squeezing through pipes and drains. This is one of those episodes that's basically comfort food for me. It's not an all-time classic, but give me a contained setting, a creepy monster, and characters stuck in danger together, and I'm already halfway sold. The creature itself is actually really effective. That translucent jelly look, especially when you see it moving through the water or writhing in the light, feels surprisingly alive for a TV production. I honestly have no idea how they pulled it off. Rods, fishing line, a wizard, whatever they did, it works. Even the partially dissolved victim scene looks fantastic. Story-wise, it's pretty straightforward Monster of the Week material, but sometimes that simplicity is exactly what I need. There's also the return of Arthur Dales, played by Darren McGavin, which is always a welcome addition, but unfortunately this turns out to be his final appearance on the show. Overall, Agua Mala is a solid, entertaining episode with a memorable creature and a fun setup. It just doesn't quite reach the heights of the stronger entries in the season, which is why it lands around the middle of the ranking for me.
What he means is I don't hear a story about a sea monster and automatically assume it's the Lord's gospel truth.
Why did you bring her here?
At number 13, we have Terms of Endearment. Mulder and Scully investigate a series of infant deaths that lead them to a seemingly normal couple, except the husband may actually be a demon searching for the perfect child. This is honestly a really fun episode for me, and a big part of that comes down to Bruce Campbell. You can put that man in almost anything, and I'm immediately more interested. But funny enough, when this originally aired, I didn't even know who Bruce Campbell was. What I did remember was how much the promo scared me. There was a quick shot of the demon reaching toward the screen that absolutely terrified me as a kid, and when I finally watched the episode, the creature itself didn't disappoint. I love how the demon is mostly kept in shadow and surrounded by fire, so you're only really seeing hints of it. That kind of restrained reveal is often way more effective than outright showing it, because your brain fills in the gaps with something even more terrifying. The twist involving Betsy potentially being something even more dangerous than Wayne is also a fun direction for the story to take. There are definitely some moments that don't totally hold hold up logically, like Mulder jumping to conclusions a bit too quickly, but honestly I can overlook that because the episode just works as a spooky standalone story. Overall terms of Endearment is entertaining, creepy in the right places, and elevated by Bruce Campbell's presence. It just doesn't quite hit the emotional or narrative highs of the stronger episodes this season, which is why it lands in the upper middle portion of the ranking for me.
We, Mulder? I'm stuck with. You're not here.
Scully, this is a classic case of demon fetal harvest.
Sitting just outside of the top 10 are Dreamland Parts I and II. The story kicks off when Mulder swaps bodies with a mysterious Area 51 employee named Morris Fletcher, after an encounter with an experimental aircraft creates some kind of reality warping effect. From there, both men are forced to navigate each other's lives while trying to figure out how to reverse what happened. Well, at least Mulder is. Body swap stories are a classic premise, and honestly, they fit the X-Files universe surprisingly well. A lot of the fun comes from watching Mulder deal with Morris's chaotic home life, while Morris just runs wild with Mulder's freedom and a lack of consequences. Both actors do a great job selling the switch, and there are plenty of memorable comedic moments throughout. One thing that does frustrate me a little is how long it takes Scully to fully realize something is wrong. She does notice something's off, but when someone is actively telling you I'm Mulder, maybe that's the point you should start paying closer attention. Part 2 wraps things up in a fun way, though I don't think it's as strong as the first half. The whole time reset element where everything snaps back to normal feels a bit too convenient, and if you think about the mechanics of it too long, it starts raising a lot of questions about what should or shouldn't have been affected. But honestly, that's probably just me overthinking things. What really matters is that these episodes are entertaining. There are great character moments, some genuinely funny scenes, especially Morris trying and failing to charm Scully, and even some surprisingly effective emotional beats with Morris's wife Joanne. So while the resolution may be a little tidy and the logic gets fuzzy in places, Dreamland Part 1 and 2 is still a very enjoyable two-parter that lands comfortably in the middle of the season for me.
Baby.
Baby me and you'll be peeing through a catheter.
Breaking into the top 10 is Monday. Mulder and Scully find themselves caught in a repeating time loop centered around a bank robbery that ends in an explosion, with only one woman, Pam, retaining memories of each reset as she desperately tries to change the outcome. This is a classic time loop premise that's been done in a lot of shows and movies, but the X-Files puts its own spin on it pretty effectively. The episode manages to balance tension and humor at the same time, which isn't always easy with this kind of story. It's revealed that Pam is essentially the anchor of the loop, and her death is what finally breaks the cycle. But that also raises a lot of questions. What does the rest of her day look like after the explosion resets things? Is she stuck reliving the same hours over and over no matter what she does? If she tried to stay awake long enough to reach Tuesday, would the universe just force a reset anyways? These are probably questions the episode doesn't want you thinking about too hard, but I can't help it. I also don't completely buy that Pam is the root cause. If you remember earlier, Scully technically isn't supposed to die, yet she does over and over again inside that bank. That almost makes it feel like the universe is correcting something that isn't meant to happen, rather than Pam creating the loop herself. But again, that just might be me overanalyzing. What really matters is that the episode is just very entertaining. It may not be especially spooky, and it's not the most traditionally X-Files story, but the concept works, the pacing is strong, and it's a lot of fun.
Wow, that is so strange.
What?
I just got the weirdest sensation of deja vu. I've been having it all morning.
At number 9 is Triangle. Mulder boards a mysterious ship in the Bermuda Triangle and somehow ends up in 1939, caught in a surreal encounter involving Nazis and a race to stop history from repeating itself. While back in the present, Scully scrambles to figure out where he's gone. This is one of those episodes that's just packed with memorable moments. It's honestly hard to talk about without wanting to list scene after scene. The concept alone is fun, and yes, I'm one of those people where if you throw Nazis into a story, there's a good chance I'm already interested. But what really makes the episode stand out is the execution. The long tracking shot sequences are probably the highlight. The way the camera moves through scenes to create the illusion of continuous takes is incredibly ambitious for television, and even when you can spot the transitions, series, it's still really impressive. It also gives everything a slightly heightened, almost cartoonish energy, where the characters feel familiar but exaggerated, which works perfectly fine for the tone. Gillian Anderson is especially great here. Her comedic timing during the search for Mulder is spot on, and those sequences might honestly be the best part of the episode. I also love how they reuse the main cast in the 1939 setting. Seeing recognizable faces playing alternate versions of themselves adds to the surreal vibe, and Skinner secretly working against the Nazis is exactly the kind of twist you'd expect from him. And of course, Scully in that red dress. Oh boy. As for what actually happened, the episode never fully spells it out, but Mulder's injuries at the end suggest there was at least some reality to it, unless he just smacked his face off the side table. Overall, Triangle is just plain entertaining. It doesn't quite hit the emotional or narrative weight of the episodes above it, but it's easily one of the most creative entries of not just the season, but the series as a whole.
I love you.
Coming in at number 8 is How the Ghost Stole Christmas. Mulder and Scully spend Christmas Eve investigating a supposedly haunted mansion where they encounter the ghosts of a doomed couple who may be manipulating events to recreate their own tragic fate. Even though this is technically a Christmas episode, it absolutely works as a spooky story too. You've got the eerie mansion, thunder and lightning, cobwebs, old libraries, fireplaces, ghosts. It checks pretty much every haunted house box you'd want. The Christmas elements mostly come through in the music and atmosphere, so it ends up being one of those rare episodes you could just as easily watch during Halloween. The episode itself is just a lot of fun. Lily Tomlin and Ed Asner are both great, and their performances really carry the emotional and comedic beats. I've never been the biggest fan of very recognizable guest stars showing up on the X-Files, but in this case it works because they fully commit to the tone. There are also a lot of memorable little moments, like Mulder scaring Scully, which is still one of my favorite bits in the entire series, and these special effects are surprisingly strong. You can tell the production team here was having a lot of fun, experimenting with visual gags and the atmosphere. If there's any downside, it's that the episode falls into the more comedic direction the show leaned into during season 6. That tone works here, but I do think the overall push toward comedy this season sometimes hurt the show in the long term. Still, How the Ghost Stole Christmas is charming, spooky, and very entertaining, easily landing it in the upper tier of the season for me. Taking the number 7 and 6 spots are Two Fathers and One Son. These episodes represent one of the biggest mythology turning points in the entire series. The apparent collapse of the Syndicate and the fallout from years of alien conspiracy. The first half, Two Fathers, is honestly a lot of setup and exposition. Much of the episode is cigarette-smoking man explaining the mythology, what's happened, what's happening, and where things are going. Even though it's framed as him talking to Fowley, it also feels like a refresher for the audience, because by this point, the conspiracy had gotten pretty dense. One thing that always confused me a bit is Cassandra's motivations, particularly her willingness to die and the conflicting implications about whether her survival or death triggers colonization. It's one of those mythology areas where the logic can feel a little murky depending on how closely you examine it. But One Son is where things really escalate. In a lot of ways, this almost feels like what Fight the Future could have been, a major payoff to years of conspiracy storytelling. I understand why they didn't resolve everything in the movie, since a full mythology conclusion might have been hard for audiences to follow, but the show ends up doing that kind of resolution here anyways. The destruction of the Syndicate is a huge moment. Though it does raise some questions, we see several members taken out, but considering the global scope established earlier in the series, it's hard to believe the entire operation vanished overnight. It almost feels like one branch was eliminated rather than the whole organization. If this was meant to be the major truth revealed moment, it feels like one of the biggest emotional threads was still left dangling. Even with those issues though, these episodes are still strong. They're ambitious, intense, and represent the X-Files leaning fully into its mythology identity. It's messy, but also feels like the end of an era, a major shift in the show's long-running conspiracy narrative. And honestly, that sense of closure, even if it's imperfect, is enough to place this two-parter fully in the upper tier of the season. Cracking the top 5 is 3 of a Kind. This episode shifts the focus to the lone gunmen as they pull Scully into a conspiracy involving mind control experiments and a mysterious woman from Byers' past, while Mulder is conveniently out of commission. You know me, I'm always happy when the lone gunmen take center stage. They're just inherently fun characters, and the episode leans into that energy pretty well. It does feel very familiar to Unusual Suspects, almost like a companion piece where you swap Mulder out for Scully, but the dynamic still works. I especially enjoy how Scully gets dragged into the story. The whole setup where she's basically tricked into coming along is great, and seeing her interact with Morris Fletcher again, including the little payback moment, is a lot of fun. It's also nice getting to see Scully loosen up a bit and play in a more comedic space. The one element I've never fully bought into is Byers' emotional attachment to Suzanne. I understand the idea that their connection was meaningful to him, and watching her get taken away by shady government forces would absolutely stick with someone, but the intensity of his obsession always felt a little disproportionate, considering how briefly they actually knew each other. Maybe I'm just being a little too cynical? Still, the episode succeeds where it counts. The lone gunmen are entertaining. The tone is pretty playful, and it gives us a different perspective on the X-Files world while Mulder sits things out. Overall, 3 of a Kind is just a really enjoyable entry, easily earning its spot near the top of the season for me.
But he's got a map.
Just missing the top 3 is Field Trip. Mulder and Scully investigate the disappearance of a couple near a mysterious cave, only to discover some mushrooms capable of trapping people in hallucinations while slowly consuming them. This is a really fun episode because it plays with the classic "it was all a dream" trope, but in a way that doesn't feel like a complete cop-out. There are subtle clues sprinkled throughout that something isn't right, characters behaving strangely, conversations don't quite track logically, and events jump forward in ways that don't make sense. Moments like Skinner and the lone gunmen suddenly agreeing with Scully's incorrect assessment are clear indicators that reality has started to unravel. And then you've got Mulder casually capturing a gray alien and bringing it home like it's a normal Tuesday. How did he pull that off? One of my favorite parts, especially on first viewing, is the fake escape near the end. The episode does a really convincing job making it seem like Mulder and Scully got out, only to reveal they never left the cave at all. It doesn't hit quite as hard once you know the twist, but it's still a really effective moment. There are definitely a few logistical questions if you think about it too hard, like how long they were actually trapped down there and how they were found in time, but those are easy enough to overlook because the episode works so well on a suspense and atmosphere level. Overall, Field Trip is creepy, clever, and memorable. Easily one of the strongest Monster of the Week entries of the season, and just shy of the very top tier. Taking the number 3 spot is The Unnatural. Mulder hears a story about an alien who lived among humans in the 1940s, disguising himself as a black baseball player in a segregated America, while trying to live out his dream of playing the game he loved. This is easily one of the most unique episodes in the entire series. The story blends historical fiction, mythology elements, and a kind of nostalgic Americana fantasy all at once. It feels less like a traditional X-Files investigation and more like a legend being passed down, and works really well for the tone. I've always looked at the events here as mostly true, but with certain details embellished for thematic purposes. The ending, for example, where Exley bleeds human blood instead of the usual alien green, doesn't really line up with established lore, but emotionally it makes perfect sense. The entire story is about an alien who wanted to be human, who wanted to belong, so having him literally bleed red at the end feels poetic rather than literal. When he tells the bounty hunter, "This is my true face," it perfectly captures what the episode is trying to say. On the surface, the story is clearly dealing with themes of racism and bigotry. An outsider rejected by his own people, who then experiences discrimination again in human society. But underneath that, I think the real core is about the American dream, with baseball acting as a symbol of hope, identity, and belonging. Even if you're not a huge baseball fan, there's something about the atmosphere, the fields, the crowd, the nostalgia, that just feels very American. Overall, The Unnatural is heartfelt, thoughtful, and unlike anything else in this series. It blends mythology, history, and emotion in a way that really lands, easily earning its place near the very top of my list.
Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die.
I scream, you scream, we all scream for non-fat tofu rice strips.
Taking the number 2 spot is Drive. Mulder is forced into a desperate race against time when a man named Patrick Crump kidnaps him and demands to be driven west at high speed, or else the pressure building inside his head will kill him. This is easily one of the best episodes of season 6, and honestly one of the best episodes of the entire series. A huge part of that comes down to Bryan Cranston's performance as Crump. He's phenomenal here, and it's not surprising at all that this role led to him being cast as Walter White on Breaking Bad. What makes the character so compelling is how he starts off as a complete jerk. He's hostile, aggressive, and difficult to sympathize with. But as the episode unfolds and you learn what happened to his wife and what he's been put through, you begin to understand him. Honestly, I wouldn't blame someone for hating the government if they believed it killed their spouse. That's a pretty reasonable emotional response. Unfortunately, Mulder ends up taking the brunt of that anger, even though he is trying to help. The emotional shift is what really makes the episode work. By the end, you're genuinely hoping this man can be saved, which makes the final reveal hit even harder. Once Crump becomes living evidence of what the government has done, his survival becomes a threat. His death is the only way to keep the secret contained, which makes the ending incredibly bleak, and that final moment is really rough. Watching someone you've spent hours trying to save die violently right next to you is the kind of trauma that would stick with anyone. You can only imagine what's going through Mulder's mind in that instant, and even worse what went through Crump's. Overall, Drive is intense and expertly acted. A near perfect episode that just barely misses the top spot for me.
You know, what kind of name is Mulder anyway? What is it, like Jewish?
Excuse me?
Taking the top spot is Arcadia. Mulder and Scully go undercover as a married couple in a seemingly perfect suburban community, where residents begin dying under mysterious circumstances, possibly tied to the neighborhood's obsession with rules and conformity. This isn't just my favorite episode of season 6, it's one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. Even though season 6 as a whole doesn't always hit the same highs as some of the earlier seasons, it still produced some real gems, and this is absolutely one of them. What really makes the episode shine isn't the monster element, though the Tulpa concept is fun, it's the Mulder and Scully dynamic. Watching them play house, navigating fake domestic life together, creates some of the best character moments in the show. The comedy lands perfectly because it's rooted in their personalities. You can honestly just sit there listing memorable moments. The flamingo scene, Scully dealing with the face cream, Mulder pushing boundaries with the HOA rules. It's packed with little interactions that make it endlessly rewatchable. The X-File is solid even if it feels somewhat familiar conceptually. At the end of the day, Arcadia succeeds because it perfectly balances humor, horror, and character chemistry. And it highlights exactly why Mulder and Scully are one of the best partnerships in television. For me, that combination easily makes it the best episode of season 6.
Woman, get back in here and make me a sandwich.
And that's my ranking of season 6. Now, this isn't definitive. Honestly, these could shift around depending on what side of the bed I get up on, but overall, this is pretty accurate to what I personally enjoy. The real question though is, what about you? What are your top 5 and bottom 5 episodes of the season? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today. I hope you're doing great, and as always, stay spooky. Huge thanks to all my channel members, you're the real MVPs of the Spooky Squad. Your support helps keep the lights flickering and the monsters fed. If you'd like to join up and help support the channel, check out the join button below. But no pressure, just watching and liking helps a ton too.